I can't believe it's already this time of year, but we are doing the All MiLB team for hitters here on the call up. He's Jack McMullen. I'm Aram Layton. This episode, hitters. Next episode will be the pitching side of things. And of course, there's so many names to go through, and we will inevitably have probably missed someone who had a strong case. I want to say that we'll name just about every single player that we think had the strongest case. But as always, you're welcome to let us know who you thought missed the cut that deserved it in the YouTube comments or on X. But I feel like there's a pretty cut and dry situation here. You mentioned that before we started recording, Jack, with the hitters. I think pitchers, you can have a lot larger of a discussion. I know there'll be some conversation about maybe who got the first spot with these hitters versus 2 and 3, or honorable mention, we should say. But, we'll get into all that and we'll explain the reasoning. But it's just a really fun time to highlight the best seasons that we saw across minor league baseball, because some of these players maybe don't have as much of the prospect intrigue, and this is the time to recognize them for their achievements this year. Because no matter how much prospect intrigue you have, no matter how old you are for your level or how many times you've played at that level, it is still very impressive to be one of the best at your position at any level in professional baseball.
No doubt. And we're not doing the first, second, third, team all Big Ten and then the honorable mentions. Because when you get down to the honorable mentions, it's like, all right, were you even that good at Big Ten football this year? But we are doing one team, and it's hitters and pitchers. This is the hitter episode, like you mentioned. And there are a bunch of names to watch. And it was like, hey, anybody that even crossed our mind when it comes to you were the best at your position in minor league baseball, you jot them down. And there are guys, like you mentioned, they have minimal prospect intrigue, but prospect intrigue is something that I think is subconsciously baked into this. I think defensive value is baked in, especially on the hitter side. And age to level, I think, was the biggest one, aside from just the typical counting offensive stats and the offensive metrics. So the offensive metrics were the driving force, but in terms of other factors that were accounted for, it was all of that kind of baked into this pie. And you're going to get you've got a 25-year-old that hit 300 with 30 homers. You've got a prospect that hit 290 with 28 homers. You're probably going to side with the prospect just because there's a little bit more helium there. But there were some guys that exceeded really any prospect at their position in minor league baseball.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is going to be at least a separator, right? I mean, if a guy's hitting 400 in his third year in AA, he's probably still going to get the nod. But when you have numbers that are pretty similar, and you have a younger player at that level, of course, it's going to be a bit more impressive. So we wanted to try to remove the prospect intrigue side in terms of looking at the numbers first and foremost. But as you know, when you are working with such a large pool of players, the numbers can get very, very close, and you start to split hairs. And when you're splitting hairs, that's where the defense can come into the conversation. That's where I think the stolen base side of it can come into the conversation. How many games you were available as well, because if you're good for an extra 20 games, of course, that's going to be part of it. And then the prospect intrigue side at least being some sort of a tiebreaker, or age to level, I think would be the better way of describing that, even though those typically go hand in hand. But we can just jump right into it, Jack. And I mean, at catcher, it's funny because I think this could have been a little bit more of a conversation early in the year. And I know this is minor league awards, but what he did at the big league level really solidified just how solid of a year it was. But you can even remove that, and starting at catcher, I think this was one of the most impressive seasons in minor league baseball, period.
No doubt. Adrian Del Castillo of the Arizona Diamondbacks was the catcher for us. And we'll dive into Del Castillo in a moment. I do want to run through the names considered. Jesus Alexander, Giants guy, the DSL, absolutely balled. He was the best player of the Dominican Summer League this summer, so he's got to be a name to be considered. Augustin Ramirez in Miami as well. He started in New York, went to Miami. Eduardo Tait in Philly. Edgar Caro with the White Sox, Moises Ballesteros with the Cubs, Samuel Basayo, who I saw Fangraphs named as the number one prospect in all of baseball with Baltimore, Blake Mitchell with Kansas City, Dalton Rushing, now kind of an outfielder, but the majority of his time is spent behind the dish this year, Jimmy Crooks in St. Louis, Cooper Ingle in Cleveland, and Drake Baldwin in Atlanta, who got some serious consideration. But I'm with you. What Del Castillo did, the numbers outweigh any other bit of prospect intrigue. 24-year-old college bat, that has proven that he's going to be a big league backup catcher. And in 105 games in Reno, this guy slashed 312, 399, 603 with 36 doubles. He had 26 homers. He K'd at a rate under 17%. And this guy, like, okay, PCL it all you want. He had a 146 WRC plus.
Yeah.
He was awesome.
Yeah, and that's why we have that stat, right? Like that's why we have the context to add there. I mean, it doesn't matter where he was playing. It was remarkable to see what he could do. And the EVs back it up too, right? Like, this is a guy that was hitting the ball hard. He was elevating consistently. He wasn't striking out. He walked at a decent clip. Like it was all around the year that I think really could solidify being that top dog. And this was a dude that I think for the most part was just consistent all year long as well, right? It didn't really feel like he hit any snags or had any moments where, oh, he's slowing down, he's coming down to earth a little bit. Like, no, it was pretty consistently dominant all year long. So I think Del Castillo was as impressive. And the other side of it is Reno is one of the more hitter-friendly environments. And sure, his numbers were bolstered in Reno. He had 1,080 OPS there. But, I mean, he was still really darn good everywhere they traveled, a 923 OPS on the road as well. So, I mean, this guy was just a monster. Drake Baldwin, as much as I wanted to put him in there because he's definitely my favorite prospect, I think, of all these names, maybe not named Edgar Caro, at the position, it just, unfortunately, like the numbers just don't quite stack up. I think when it comes to projecting as a big leaguer, I like Baldwin as much as anybody. And that's part of it. But I mean, it's 793 OPS. It's just not going to stack up with what Del Castillo is doing. But Edgar Caro's really strong finish to the year, I think, definitely has him in that conversation comfortably. Agustin Ramirez also finished really well with the Marlins, which was nice to see. And I mean, the age to level side of things with like Eduardo Tait, I think would definitely solidify him in the conversation. But Ballesteros just mashing the way that he did. This is where the defense has to come into the conversation, though. Like age to level, offense, all that stuff was really, really, really impressive for Ballesteros this year. But of all of the players that we're probably going to mention here, the defense probably lagged the most. Maybe him and Agustin Ramirez to a degree, and then Dalton Rushing up there with anybody. A lot of left field down the stretch here in those final 30 games. So that makes it interesting as well. But even then, Rushing in the PCL, as good as he has been, those numbers are not Del Castillo numbers.
Right. I was going to ask you, but you said Baldwin is who you might be, highest on in this list that isn't Edgar Caro. But then like my mind immediately went to Tait.
And you also have Samuel Basayo here still. I forgot about that.
Yeah, get wrecked.
Yeah, so it's obviously Basayo, but yeah, man, I didn't really think about it until I went back and looked at all the names. Like Tait is still a guy that I think upside wise I really like, but I think with Baldwin being legitimately, like, I think he's big league ready tomorrow. That's why he kind of has the edge on the younger guys, but Basayo's the guy here, like, obviously. I don't know if he's I mean, number one is crazy. That's really exciting. I'm excited to dig into the Fangraphs rankings there. But I mean, sure, you can have a conversation about him anywhere in the top 15, and no, it's undisputed there. So obviously, Basayo's the top of these players, but also just shows you, the catching position at the big league level has become so strong. And then you're seeing now all of these prospects coming up, man. I mean, a position that used to have nobody at it. Like, I just legitimately walked myself through a few different players and was like, oh, this guy's my favorite. Wait, I forgot about this guy who's clearly ranked the highest for us. And then this guy. So, I mean, this position's in good shape moving forward.
No doubt, man. First base, not in as good a shape, I will say, but they did have a 40 homer guy this go around. Davison De Los Santos, understandably so, is, he's going to be up there, I think, in consideration for minor league player of the year. But Davison De Los Santos started this year with Arizona, went to Miami, and in 137 games between AA and AAA, / 294, 343, 571, 25 doubles. But Davison De Los Santos hit 40 homers and drove at 120. It was a 132 WRC plus. There are a lot of guys that could be considered here that I think are maybe like, I don't like more well-rounded products, but at the end of the day, you hit 40, you hit 40. Davison De Los Santos, Amarillo, Reno aside, is absolutely the most productive and the best first baseman of minor league baseball in 2024.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I mean, you hit 40 and we were talking about it. I mean, with the nugget from Eli Sussman thing that like he was the first player, presumably in 69 years to win the minor league home run title and be traded mid-season. A reason behind that would probably be the fact that in the final 30 games of the season here, and obviously they traded him before that, but they think they saw the writing on the wall here in Arizona. What do you think Davison De Los Santos is? I hate to have a negative here when we're talking about the best hitter at first base, but this blows my mind. What do you think his chase rate was over the final 30 games of the season?
Pretty darn high. To be conservative, mid-30s.
Over the final 30 games of the season, Davison De Los Santos' chase rate was 50.6%.
That's crazier than the highest chase rate at Major League Baseball's level. Like Luis Robert, Sal Perez up there, and they're like low to mid 40s. And Davison was chasing minor league pitching at a 50.
So if you're wondering why a guy who can hit 40 in a minor league season is not more highly regarded, this is it.
But Andy's 21 years old. 21 years old just hit 40, and it's like, hey, why is he not a top 100 prospect?
Exactly. So two schools of thought here, and I actually kind of subscribe to both of them. And great get for the Marlins because of the fact that he can hit 40 in a minor league season, and he can hit 40 in a major league season if he can shore these things up. The concern is, I know the Marlins talked to him when they traded for him and said, hey, we're going to need you to cut down on the chase, and he hasn't. But maybe, it's hard to do in a season where now you go to a less hitter-friendly environment, you're seeing all these different arms. He's going to need to go to the drawing board this offseason and figure out how he can tone down that chase. But the crazy part to me is he changes environments. He goes to a much tougher place to hit with all of these different arms. He was 20 years old at the start of the season. He's one of the youngest guys at that level. And yeah, the numbers weren't great in the final, month or so of the season. But this guy still kept slugging. And this guy still ultimately got to that 40 home run plateau with 25 doubles as well and a couple triples. Like, the talent is off of the charts here in terms of the impact. One of the more impressive batting practice sessions I've ever seen from a guy that's not in the major leagues. So fun to watch. But, that's just the thing to monitor here because this guy could be a top prospect, even as a limited defender, if he could just cut down on this egregious chase. But the fact that he was able to be productive, the number for the whole season, by the way, 42% chase rate. When you can hit 40 bombs when you're chasing at that clip, just shows you when he barrels it, like it's gone. So really fun, to watch this guy go about his business when he's hot. But obviously it can get frustrating when he's not.
Well, and there were a couple in Jacksonville that flirted with 460. I think he hit a ball 470 something in Jacksonville, Florida. And we talked about that. Like the ball is not supposed to fly like that.
476.
476 in Jacksonville, Florida. Like that's not supposed to happen.
In the middle of the summer. No.
So craziness. I will say very tempted to go Bryce Eldridge here. He certainly led the names considered. It was Bryce Eldridge in San Francisco, CJ Kafis in Cleveland, Xavier Isaac in Tampa, Trey Morgan with Tampa, Tyler Locklear with Seattle, and Luken Baker with the Cardinals. Luken Baker is strictly a stat guy, but at the end of the day, man, he was the best power hitter in minor league baseball last year. And he was, shuttled between St. Louis and Memphis this year, majority in Memphis. I think he hit 32 homers again. He's the best AAA slugger I've ever seen.
He's a mechanical adjustment away, I think, from it actually translating a little bit more too. And that's like a dog days of the offseason dive. Maybe we'll get to at some point. We got to be
January 15th. I'm bored as shit. Time to talk Luken Baker.
Let's talk about the last little thing Luken Baker can tweak to get right.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, he's always going to be in that conversation. Eldridge doing what he's done, 19 years old to get to AAA, age to level, obviously a huge part of it, but 883 OPS across all of those levels is just absurd. And I mean, has to be that runner-up guy there as well. Kafis was outrageous for a large portion of the year. And then, understandably slowed down a little bit as he, I think, one, got a little bit more of an aggressive, challenge here and got to face some better pitching. But two, we talked about it. Like, we got a lot of replies like, why is Kafis so low on the Guardians list? And like this and that and that. And I'm like, it's been really awesome to see what he's doing. But, all indications point towards it just not being sustainable at that level of production. When you look at a lot of the underlying stuff and, through the first 60 games for Kafis, he hit 338 with an 1,048 OPS. And then the 48 games after that, he hit 234 with a 722 OPS. So still a fantastic year for Kafis, who clearly elevated himself within the organization and got himself up to AA for a large portion of the season. So absolutely a great year, but comes up a little bit short just as the AA challenge, slowed down what was an outrageous year for him. But Trey Morgan, I mean, just doing what he's done. Of course, these other guys are slugging a little bit more at the position, but just to consistently hit the way that he has was awesome. And Xavier Isaac, similar story where he gets a AA, swing and miss ticks up a little bit, and with some injuries as well mixed into the year, just didn't have quite the cumulative season that some of these other guys had.
Yeah, no doubt. Second base, this was the easiest one you could possibly imagine. Like I opened the doc and immediately it was just Christian Campbell, the Boston Red Sox. Like, Christian Campbell's the second baseman. He has to be. There's no doubt about that. I saw he was just named Baseball America's Minor League Player of the Year, which is awesome considering that this guy was a non-prospect coming into this year. Like, it was, he was taking middle, later rounds last year. And it's like, that's that. Between high A, double A, and triple A, 115 games this year for Christian Campbell of the Boston Red Sox. 330, 439, 558 slash in 115 games. 32 doubles, 20 homers, 77 driven in. He swiped 24 bags and was efficient in doing so. He walked about 15% of the time. It was a 14.5% walk rate. He K'd fewer than 20% of the time. And this cat had a 180 WRC plus. 180. He, like, out of nowhere.
This was the best year in minor league baseball. It just point blank. This was the best year. Of course, when you talk about the levels and climbing the levels, that just maintaining the production at each level is the craziest part to me, because we can talk about the swing mechanics, and that was part of the reason probably where I was like, okay, he's going to meet his match at some point. But even that aside, even if it was the most aesthetically pleasing swing and it really, in my mind, translated at the big league level in the clearest of ways, you still would have thought there'd be this adjustment at either AA or AAA. And there just really wasn't. There was a few games in AAA, I think, where experienced pitchers executed and, Campbell looked like a breakout prospect. But it was individual games. That's every human being in professional baseball. Even the best of the bigs are going to have individual games that aren't good. This guy just was allergic to a tough stretch. It was amazing. And I think his approach was a huge part of that, because, he's going to swing freely in terms of like cutting it loose and really getting his best swing off. But he picks his spots well to get his best swing off, and he's not going to give away strikes as often. Again, in AAA, you saw a little bit more of that, but just consistently through the year, like, he really didn't give away strikes and ABs. And when you're doing that and mixing that with elite bat speed and just crushing balls in the air when he does get it up there, like, this was just one of the more absurd seasons from a surprising standpoint, but also just from a production standpoint. 90th percentile north of 106 miles per hour, like a chase rate right around 20%. I mean, there's so many things that really stand out that were incredibly impressive. And I mean, this was just one of those years that I think we'll remember for a long time, no matter what happens with Christian Campbell's career. And I hope it's nothing but fantastic things. I think the better Christian Campbell's career goes, the more likely we are to honestly forget this season. Yeah. But just in general, I think this will be one of those, like, remember what Campbell did in 24? Like, that this is going to be one of those callback years where it's like, this is the best year we've seen since, or the most surprising year we've seen since Campbell in 24. Like, this is going to be a callback year for sure. And that's awesome. And that's why I love the sport is, man, like, the most unsuspecting character sometimes can just burst onto the scene and do some crazy things.
You know what it feels very similar to is Matt Mervis's 2022.
Yes.
Does it not?
Yeah.
Because it's like Mervis essentially came out of nowhere, and the talent was there, but it just didn't really work in the draft process. Like, he signed as a non-drafted free agent after that 5-round 2020 draft, and it was like a pretty slow 21, and then 22. He all of a sudden became. It's like, wow, he might have put together the best year in all of minor league baseball.
Yeah.
That
Oh, yeah.
it's essentially spitting image to what Campbell did this year.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's a great comp. And honestly, he'd tell you himself it was terrible in 21. Like, it was bad. And that's the really remarkable side of it as well. And other names too, like another year that it's funny, this position gives me headaches, I guess, because I think the clear runner up here too is another guy that I don't know if the swing translates, but man, you can't deny the production.
Right. Michael Arroyo from Seattle is who you're talking about. And like, I don't know how it makes any sense, but Michael Arroyo was absolutely phenomenal. Other names to consider were Nick York in Pittsburgh / Boston. And it's looking the part up at the big league level right now. Like, that swing might play a little bit. Juan Brito was an accumulator with Cleveland, and he was in a hitter-friendly ballpark in Columbus. But at the end of the day, like, Brito had a good year. He bounced around second, first, third. James Triantos with the Cubs, Peyton Eales with Minnesota, who we talked about, indie ball guy that just climbed and had an amazing year. Jadier Arenamo with Milwaukee had a hell of a year, and just another guy for the Milwaukee Brewers. Hao-Yu Lee in Detroit as well, and then Luke Keeschall in Minnesota. We didn't do a DH, so it has to be, wherever he played when he was on the field, and it was second base for the most part. But Arroyo, no doubt, the runner-up there.
Part of the reason why I'm so glad Keeschall is just getting that taken care of now. Like, I just seeing the game logs every week. It's like, oh, he's back DHing again. That elbow's bothering him again. Like, gosh.
Like, what are we doing?
Just get that thing right and get him back. But Keeschall, I think, would have been at the top, near the top, obviously not the top, but would have been right there, I think, just behind Arroyo in that top three at this position had he, been able to stay healthy and avoid, missing time with the Tommy John surgery. But Arroyo, I mean, what he has done this year from a power perspective for a guy that's like 5'7", 5'8" is absurd. 23 bombs, and he's going to have to slug given, the profile here. So it's been cool to see him lean into that, just driving the ball in the air pretty darn consistently. That's been one of the more impressive years overall. But this position in general, a little bit thinner, I think, because most of the time players in the minor leagues, if they're going to potentially end up stuck at second base, teams are trying to find a way to get them anywhere else and play them anywhere else. I think when you look at like what the Cubs have just kind of settled and realized here is that, like, with Triantos, like, this is just what it is. They've been trying it for the last couple of years. Now it's like, okay, let's just have him focus on getting to the big leagues as a bat, and he's a second baseman here. But another guy that just seems to accumulate, right? A lot of doubles, 6 triples, mixing in a handful of home runs, and then he's just going to hit 300. Like, he's going to hit 300, I think, every year he's in the minor leagues. So another guy that very young, 21 years old, and did great things between AA and AAA as well.
Yep. We're going to get to shortstop here in a moment, but before that, I do want to tell you about our friends at Game Time, because it's all about live events. We know that some of the best memories are made at a marquee sporting event, your favorite band performing in your city, or a comedian that just cracks you up. Now, Game Time can help you out with their new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even faster and easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to only show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Simple process. Open up an event. I did it yesterday. I got to Pittsburgh a day sooner than I was thinking. So I was like, hey, I'm going to do the fan thing. I open up Game Time. I see 3 tiers of deals fed to me off the top: the super deals, the amazing deals, and the great deals. I actually went to amazing because I saw like a 100 level ticket for $10. And I was like, I'm just going to do that and sit wherever. And I did, and it was awesome. And I saw Tobias Myers and Colin Ray spin a masterclass for Milwaukee, because of course they did. You have the opportunity to essentially curate your deal to fit your priorities on Game Time Picks. So go check out Game Time Picks. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater. List goes on. You get panoramic seat views before checkout. You also get their lowest price guarantee, which means if you find a better deal in the same section and row elsewhere, Game Time credits you 110% of the difference. And Game Time covers your purchases with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code JUSTBASEBALL, all caps, one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code. I'm going to do it today. JUSTBASEBALL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it, Mr. Layton?
Game time.
It's also time to talk about Shortstop. And it was a conversation, certainly. Had it via email, had it via text. And at the end of the day, we opt for Carson Williams in Tampa. Carson Williams over Kevin McGonigal in Detroit. It was really tight. At the end of the day, Kevin McGonigal between low A and high A had a 144 WRC plus. Now, you look at the standard numbers, you look at the counting stats, you look at the OPS too. I think McGonigal is 40, 50 points higher in the OPS department than Carson Williams was.
Yeah.
But WRC plus, McGonigal had a 144. Carson Williams had a 142. And Carson Williams is a 21-year-old in Double-A for the entire year in the most pitcher-friendly league in minor league baseball, the Southern League. 115 games, slashed 256, 353, 469. 20 doubles, 20 homers, 69 driven in. He swiped 33 bags. He walked in an 11.5% clip. Carson, paired with the elite defense that he plays, absolutely proved that he is a top 10 prospect in all of baseball this year, I feel like.
No doubt. And I think with I love McGonigal, and any opportunity since he was drafted for me to push him high on something, I'm going to do it. But the other side of it too is McGonigal, unfortunately, getting hurt and having the season cut a little bit short, only playing 74 games, but also in the games that he did play, still kind of a split. Mostly playing short, but still played 21 games at second base as well. Whereas you have a Carson Williams who's going to be an elite defender at shortstop. I think the most important part of this whole thing, and when people just look at the surface level stats, and that's why I'm glad you mentioned WRC plus and just how pitcher friendly the Southern League has been. It's not just the fact that it's been pitcher friendly in the Southern League. It has been impossible to hit there. We have seen numbers just be atrocious out there, like an absolute joke. And I still believe that they were messing with stuff out there. You'll never be able to get a confirmation or whatever. I just think it's interesting that after last year, where we have it very available and known, and there's a report from Baseball America on the exact dates of when these balls were going to be experimented with, there wasn't even a report of, hey, they're not using balls in the Southern League this year. There was just nothing. There was just no conversation around it. It was just mum. So I still, in my mind, think that they may have been playing with some stuff out there. I think anytime you see the numbers get that low, it's pretty crazy. That's for an off-season conversation, because I'm going to do some digging and I want to just understand a little bit more of maybe what was going on out there. But I've also spoken to some pitchers who think that the balls were no different, but could be something inside. But from a grip perspective, probably the same. Regardless, this guy hit 20 bombs out there. Nobody was really slugging like that out there. 469 slug in that Southern League is really impressive. I think the fact that we've seen him lean into the stolen base side even further and really solidify that as a part of his game now too. Cutting down the strikeout rate. Now this is the first full season where he's had the strikeout rate at a level but below 30%. But the power, the stolen base perspective, the elite defense, you might see a slash line that's probably as light as anybody on the, all MiLB team here. When you relate it to the level, which is why WRC plus is so great. He was standing out. If you put him in the Texas League this year, I think he has an OPS over 900 comfortably. To do what he did in that Southern League, to slug 469, no one's doing that. So really impressive here. And most players pass through there. He had to play the whole year there.
The entire year.
He finished out with 4 games in AAA, but this guy had to play the whole year in the worst environment. So I think that says a lot.
Comfortably top 10 in baseball, right?
Yes, with the glove too. Yeah.
Wow. That's really cool that we're talking about that guy, where I know during spring breakout, dude, we were sitting there in Fort Myers and you were like, I'm not sure, man. There's some stuff here. And I love that he proved that over the entirety of the 2024 season that he can make corrections and really level up as he climbs level by level. Names that were considered, obviously McGonigal with Detroit, Aiden Miller with Philly, regardless of whether you think he sticks at short or not. If you're listening to this, at the end of the day, he played shortstop nearly entirely, I think absolutely entirely for Philly this year. Emil Morales with the Dodgers was another complex standout. Jesus Made with the Milwaukee Brewers. Wellbeing Francisca of the Cleveland Guardians. Angel Hanal of the Cleveland Guardians as well. Alex Freeland of the Dodgers was an upper-level star this year. And then Leo DeVries and Sebastian Walcott, the two wonderkins, to what they did. And you talk age to level, nobody sniffs what those two did.
No, and I think a guy that may have had as strong of a case, even right there with McGonigal, maybe even stronger than McGonigal, is Angel Hanal with the way that he finished the year in that Guardians prospect. I mean, good defender too. Like, looks like he can stick at the spot, but this guy hit 330 this year as a switch hitter who's 20 years old. The difference was, he did it pretty much the whole season in high A. I think pretty much after, to start June, he got promoted to high A and then, just rolled from there. But this guy finished the year on an absolute tear. He walked at a really high clip down the stretch and, just consistently making contact from both sides of the plate, mixing in 10 home runs. That 38 doubles for Hanau. This was a really, really strong year for a guy that was 19 at the start of the season. So I think another player that definitely deserves to be in that top tier conversation at the position.
Just when we think that the Guardians might be done, dude, it's like they have a now pop and then they have a Wellbeing Francisca pop. And it's just guys like that. And oh, by the way, they had some pitching standouts. And who knows if Tugboat or if Austin Peterson or if Messick can be serviceable major league starters. But they always have some of the best performers in minor league baseball.
Francisca, another 5'8" guy. That is just another switch hitter that slaps the ball around the yard and ends up with a 330 batting average, but still somehow also slugs enough too. It's crazy how they are able to find these guys and just put them out there and just they develop so nicely. 18 years old for Francisca, already playing in low A and doing what he did this past year. I think this is a guy that's going to be climbing up top prospect lists pretty quickly.
Have you gotten to watch much of Emil Morales at this point or no?
A little bit, it's a little bit limited with those lower level guys. I think what Morales did is obviously going to make him have a lot of helium and be very popular. Anytime you have a rookie level prospect in the Dodgers or Yankees system, those guys, especially the Dodgers, so they get touted. I honestly felt like there's some more swing and miss to Morales' game than people may be able to account for because he hit 336. But when you look at some of the underlying stuff and you look at the swing, there's definitely swing and miss there. But that's not what we're talking about here in terms of putting players on first team or honorable mention or whatever. It's what you did, and he had an 1163 OPS. What I saw though is a guy that's much more advanced than his level. So even though he was 17 years old this season, very patient, picks his spots well, rarely expands. But I am kind of curious to see how things look against better pitching when they can execute more within the zone.
Gotcha. And that's a 25 thing, and I'm sure we'll see him in 25. By the way, we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about him on the Friday episode when we do pitchers. But this kid, Edgardo Quintero? Is that his name that just came up with the Dodgers?
Enriquez.
Edgardo Enriquez. That's right. Edgardo Enriquez. Dude, I mean, he just climbed like a rocket ship. Low A, high A, double A, triple A, big leagues in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Dodgers, man. And especially on the pitching side, they're going to find – this was the Orion Kerkering path, right? Where
yeah, but this guy threw 104. Kerkering, it's that slider, and he also throws 100. There's a big difference between 100 and 104.
I tweeted 50% of his pitches this year were higher than 100.0 miles per hour. Dude. And I think he touched 102.0 and above 30 plus times.
Dude.
This guy throws fuzz. Can help the Dodgers here down the stretch.
That's craziness. All right, let's go to third base here. Kobe Mayo was our answer. Kobe Mayo of the Baltimore Orioles. He had I did account for a couple of games in high A on rehab because the high A games were awesome. He had
Hey,
3
there's still the
homers.
minor leagues.
It's still the minor league. So
And there's a lot of 22-year-olds in high A, by the way.
exactly. So 93 games in, I think, 4 games in high A, and then the rest in triple A. He slashed 293, 372, 592, 26 doubles and 25 homers in 93 games. He drove in 73, 10.5% walk rate, and a 145 WRC plus. You brought up Matt Shaw. I was like, is it Mayo or Matt Shaw? Like, I don't know. And then you saw Mayo's just like raw numbers in the OPS. It's like, oh shit, it's got to be this guy. He's amazing. I don't care what happened at the big league level this year. This guy is going to be a star in the major leagues.
Yeah, he's going to hit bombs, man. And like, I think there was some valuable information to get in that big league stint. And I know that just everything that we understand from Kobe Mayo and having him on the show a couple of times, like this guy's going to be able to rectify that this offseason, or at least he's going to do every single thing possible and put the work in to get that right. And that's why I'm excited to see what he's going to do next year. But you saw that even going into this year, like shoring up even some of the smaller things to maximize that power to the nth degree at the AAA level as a guy that was 22 years old for the entirety of the season. Like we saw that progress this year. It just wasn't maybe quite enough to get him to be ready for the big leagues. And I'm excited to see what that looks like next year. This guy had a 300 ISO. I mean, a 300 ISO in your age 22 season and really just playing in AAA is nuts. And he kept the strikeout rate in check, 25%, walking at a 10% clip. Like when he is really locked in here, every single thing he hits is going to be in the air and hit hard, generally to the pull side, but he can go to all fields when he needs to. It just was consistent slug from this guy, all year long when he was available. And to hit 25 home runs in 93 games with another 26 doubles and 3 triples too, by the way, just crazy stuff to have that many extra base hits and to have more than half of your hits go for extra bases. Like this guy's going to slog consistently, whether he's hitting 230 or he's hitting 270. He hit 293 this year in AAA, but more on the big league side, whether it's 230 or 265. Like a big part of those hits that are contributing to whatever that batting average is going to be for extra bases.
AAA is clearly too easy for him. Now it's just a matter of like getting his feet wet and getting acclimated at the big league level. And I think that he's got a much longer leash to do so next year when you open next year, because he's going to be given the opportunity in late March, early April, and he's just going to be able to run with it instead of like, hey, welcome to the show in August. We're in the midst of a division chase. Like, let's go do this. And if you don't perform for 4 games, then your ass is on the bench for 5 days. Like it was the Heston Kjerstad problem. And like, no disrespect to Heston Kjerstad, but like you shouldn't put Heston Kjerstad and Kobe Mayo in the same bucket. If Mayo is on your roster, he should be playing every day.
Yeah.
So
100% agree.
Other names considered at third base, Andre Chaparro was certainly there for Washington, started with Arizona. Matt Shaw with the Cubs, Luke Adams with the Milwaukee Brewers, Shea Whitcomb in Houston. Whitcomb was a AAA masher this year. Braden Taylor in Tampa. Taylor had a way better year than I think anybody was anticipating, despite being a first-round pick last year. Charles McAdoo started with Pittsburgh, then went to Toronto. Kim Collier, who really turned it on. That's been pretty well documented on this show in Cincinnati. And then Kyle Karros, who is the Northwest League Player of the Year for Spokane. He was he's a Rockies prospect, Kyle Karros. I think the son of Eric Karros, the former big leaguer. So it's a good list here. I feel like there's one guy that really jumps out, and it's Shaw.
Yeah, I mean, Shaw was awesome to finish the year. And I think if the season was longer, he probably closes that gap even further and really gets himself close to the top spot. But I mean, just to see what he did in AAA and just from a consistency standpoint, seeing the slug tick up and just looking like a more complete hitter all the way around, like that definitely was something that stood out. Luke Adams, it's got to be one of the craziest stats I've ever seen in my life. This guy was hit by 40 pitches. 40. You have 443 on base percentage because he walks. He's super patient. I don't know if I've ever heard of a guy getting hit by pitch 40 times in 101 games. Since the start of the 2023 season, he has played 200 games on the dot, Luke Adams, and he has been hit by 61 pitches.
Dude. Like, so Milwaukee has the king of the hit by pitch on the mound in Mizorowski and the king of the hit by pitch at the plate in Luke Adams, too.
He's the sacrificial lamb to cancel it out. He's just got to wear it.
Right.
But I mean, a really impressive year from Adams, mostly in that, in some tough environments as well. And just a guy that can hit it really hard, but also gets on base at a ridiculous clip, whether he's getting hit or walking. And I think hit a bit of a snag at the end that suppressed the numbers some, but still impressive. Taylor, similar, where I think he was performing quite well despite the underlying being slightly uninspiring compared to what he was doing. So then it caught up to him a bit more in the AA level, but he's definitely an outslug the EVs guy, can really backspin it, especially to the pull side. And we saw that really shine through this year. McAdoo was another one of my favorite stories, just a guy that kind of came out of nowhere and was just awesome. So see McAdoo do his thing. And as you mentioned, like Collier, like we discussed the switch really that we saw just totally flip for him and really just go nuts down the stretch here to put together a really great season, I think, for an age to level and just I think overall everything we saw from him, I thought it was a great year. So, and then Chaparro, I mean, talk about another great story. This guy's succeeding a little bit in the show, so it was a great year for him as well. And I know he loved his time in the PCL, but regardless, I mean, the EVs and the batted ball data backs it.
They stuck around. Last but not least, the outfield, and we've got 3 outfielders, obviously, and a bunch of names to watch. Outfield number 1, we're going to go kind of one by one. Roman Anthony of the Boston Red Sox was the first outfielder, and this was an absolute shoo-in. 119 games between AA Portland and AAA Worcester. 291, 396, 498 slash. He had 32 doubles, hit 18 homers, drove in 65, 21 stolen bases, and he just did his thing, man. He walked at a 15% clip, and this young a guy between double and AAA has a 149 WRC plus. Like, he's absolutely near the tippy top in terms of minor league baseball and prospects in the game.
I mean, to do what he consistently did, similar to what we talked about with Campbell, where it's like, okay, now you're AAA, he's 20. Yeah, right. How are you going to handle it? Just fine. I mean, his final 20 games of the season, he was as good as anybody. And it really was all year long. But just to see him get to AAA, you wonder if maybe he'll run out of a little bit of gas. Like, this is the longest season he's ever had. He's facing the most polished pitching he's ever seen. Final 20 games, this guy hit 340, 349, 457. What I love about this slash line, though, remember we were talking about Bryce Harper and his ridiculous homerless streak? And it's like, oh, wow, why isn't he homered in so long? But, oh, by the way, he has an 880 OPS even in this stretch where he's not homering. In these 20 games for Roman Anthony, he didn't homer. His final 20 games of the season did not homer. And he still hit 343 with a 947 OPS. That's important for a couple reasons. One, the one thing that I do have a little concern about is just his ability to pull the ball in the air consistently, because he can get a little bit long to the ball and that'll kind of cause him to be more inside out. But the fact that he could have a ground ball rate of 53% like he did through that stretch, but he hits the ball so hard and still mixes in so many line drives and goes the other way with such authority that he can be productive and also walks at such a high clip. Like, that hedges the concern, because he's going to get better and better at getting into it to his pull side. But in the stretches where, maybe things go awry a little bit, I think that's always going to be the thing that creeps in, where it's like, okay, I'm struggling. I'm putting the ball on the ground a little bit more than I want to over these few months. Got to get right. It's just clear that even in those stretches, his swing decisions, his exit velocities, and his ability to go the other way with such authority is still going to allow him to be productive, even if he's not tapping into everything. So, I mean, it was a year that I think really solidified Roman Anthony as probably that top prospect in baseball with what we were able to see from him.
Yeah, I'm not going to do the follow-up like you think so, because I know that we've talked about that a little bit. And also, I'm sure we're 2-3 weeks away from the end of season update.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we'll find out in due time, but yeah, I mean, it's weird because it feels like a quote unquote weak top crop right now with who has graduated, but at the end of the day, these guys are so darn talented. And I feel like it's somewhat wide open in terms of the top prospect in all of baseball. The second outfielder is Chandler Simpson of the Tampa Bay Rays. It's really hard to leave a guy that stole 100 bags off this list, and we're not going to. 110 games between high A and double A, 355, 410, 397 slash. He had 16 extra base hits. It's not a lot. He was 104 for 121 in the stolen base department. He walked 9% of the time. He struck out 8.5% of the time. And wouldn't you know it, in the Southern League and in the South Atlantic League in high A, this guy had a 141 WRC plus. You get on base at a 410 clip and you're the fastest guy in professional baseball, regardless of level, magic's going to happen, and magic happened.
I mean, there's so many stats I could break down on this guy that are all just stand out, crazy stuff. Like, I'll just do a few though. He had 4 stolen base game, and then he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 3 stolen base games. And then I wouldn't even be able to count in time to see how many it was in terms of multi stolen base games the entirety of the season. He had 4 4-hit contests. He had, I think, another 23 hit contests, and then a trillion 2-hit contests as well. He walked more than he struck out. And the other thing that, it's kind of an obvious thing with the profile, but I just don't think gets discussed enough, is he's phenomenal in center and was phenomenal all year long. So just seeing that side of things as well, like, this guy can impact the game in a lot of ways, even if it's going to come with very little slug. And yeah, I think that's very clear. But he is just such a fun throwback player that does things in the stat sheet that you just don't see that frequently anymore. And I mean, I think, this is my favorite stat, actually. How many hitless games do you think Chandler Simpson had this year?
I mean, not many. He was the minor league hit king, too. So, all right, he wins the minor league batting title, and he steals 100 bases. Like, that's the big thing.
How many games did he play? Do you have that in front of you?
Yeah, he played 110 games. Give me 15 hitless games.
5.
No way.
5 hitless games this year, if I have that correct.
Think about how much fun. Positive. Think about how much fun these 6 months were for Chandler Simpson. Like, when was he pissed?
Dude, that's a great question. Screw home runs. I honestly, like, as long as I know I'm going to have a big league career one way or another, like, I think I'd take this archetype, because I think you nailed it. When was he pissed? I don't think he was. I can tell you when. On July 19th, he was pissed. On July 4th, unfortunate day to be pissed.
But, like, how can you be pissed on July 4th? I'm just not sure.
So he probably enjoyed the fireworks and had a great day.
Right.
On June 6th, he was pissed. And on May 5th, he was pissed. And on the 28th of April, he was pissed. That's it. So, those are the only hitless contests.
The last hitless day he had was July, 19th, you said?
July 19th was the last hitless day he had.
Think about that. Think about that for a minute. These are all, like, separated by a month, essentially. And the last hitless day he had was July 19th. We're talking on September 25th, and their season, like, just ended because he was in the postseason.
I think the fact that I wish he had 1 more 4-hit game, so I could say he had more 4-hit games than hitless games.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have quadruple the 3-hit games, more than that, actually, I think it's like quintuple the 3-hit games, then you have 0-hit games. Yeah, baseball is quite fun.
Yeah.
And I just saw Victor Scott put on his story the other day, like of Chandler. It was a picture of Chandler Simpson, I think, from a story or a headline or whatever. And he just said fastest man in the world, which is really funny because, that's probably where I draw the line. But I did say, the last episode, like, there's nobody who plays the game 60 feet, 6 inches with the mound away and 90 feet bases that's faster than Chandler Simpson. His buddy Victor Scott is pretty fast himself.
Right.
I think he wants to see Chandler running in the Olympics, it sounds like.
No, I mean, what we were promised, Tyreek Hill versus Usain Bolt. Let's throw Chandler Simpson in there too, and, like, let's just get an 100-meter dash and see what happens.
I love it.
I think Lyles. It'll be Tyreek Hill, Noah Lyles, and Chandler Simpson. So that'll be good.
I know the order of who I'm rooting for there for sure.
Are you going Are you going Simpson 1?
Yes.
Okay, I was gonna say Dolphins fan. All right,
Yeah.
Lyle's last. I know
Lyle's last. That was
he
pretty much
talks
the
a
only reason
lot.
why I said that.
He
Lyle's
talks a lot.
last by a lot.
Yeah. So I don't know. It was kind of a toss up. It's like, all right, Dolphins fan, but baseball guy. Like, I'm not sure. Last but not least, Lazaro Montes of the Seattle Mariners, 19-year-old Lazaro Montes, 116 games between low and high A, a 138 WRC plus, 288, 397, 484 slash, 21 homers. This guy drove in 105 this year, walked at a 14.5% clip. This guy, this young, seeing two levels that I mean, like not many 19-year-olds are going to be at, and walking that much to hedge the power as well. Like this was so impressive and very well documented on this show throughout the season, obviously.
Yeah, 4 multi-homer games is pretty fun too when you're so young for the levels, and being able to cut down on the whiff the way that he has, elevating only a 34% ground ball rate for a guy that's that big and long. And trying, and it was very clear that his focus this year was to make more contact. At least it looked like to me that he was like, okay, I know I can slug, but I also need to hit, to be able to, reach the highest level, especially with the limited defensive value. And he did get better to the point where he wasn't like a total disaster out there every time I checked in. But the fact that he was able to cut down on the whiff, get that strikeout rate at 23%, but still maintain his consistent ability to elevate, I think says a lot, because usually those things work against each other until you can find that happy medium. So to hit the ball in the air as consistently as he had, but also be able to put the ball in play consistently relative to what we'd seen in the past, the approach just continuing to get better, ran a chase rate of 20%. This was a fantastic year. And I really think he's really solidified himself as, one of the best bat first guys that you're going to find in the minor leagues right now. And the bat just seems to be continue to become more well-rounded as he gets more opportunity.
Yeah. So those are the three outfielders. You got Roman Anthony, Chandler Simpson, and Lazaro Montes. The other names considered: two Rocks, Cole Carrig, the guy. Also, Robert Kalaz, complex killer. Owen Casey of the Cubs, Henry Bolte and Colby Thomas of the Oakland A's, Deshaun Kersey Jr. in Minnesota, Alan Roden in Toronto, Alejandro Osuna in Texas, Justin Crawford in Philly, and two Cleveland guys, Jason Chorio and Jonathan Rodriguez. This was a fun list, and I feel like there are a lot of guys that it's like, wow, you just accumulated to a level where you cannot be denied. I think about a Colby Thomas and a Bolte and a Jonathan Rodriguez in that regard, but also you've got like, wow, Justin Crawford, you're this good, and I know that we just talked about that on the Phillies episode.
I mentioned Bolte and like as a breakout guy in the beginning of the year, and then we didn't really check in much after that, but might have been a little bit of just the A's effect where we just haven't maybe tapped into that system maybe as much as we should. But I mean, this guy hits the living crap out of the ball. 90th percentile, 108 miles per hour. And I mean, he struck out a lot, 35% strikeout rate. So that was probably part of the reason why. But I mean, he was productive. And I don't think there's a way around that in terms of how productive he was. Cole Carrig is a guy that's going to accumulate across the board. So it's always fun to see him do his thing in that Rocky system. He's going to steal bags. He's going to sneak in some power. He's going to hit a ton of triples. So I'm a big fan of Carrig, and that's a guy I'm always trying to celebrate. But I do think that what Robert Kalaz did is really eye popping, because I had my concerns about the whiff. I still do to a degree, but the fact that the whiff looked like it was going to be something that going from the complex was really going to rear its head in low A. And for him to go to low A, I know it was a small sample, but even to be there for a couple weeks and put together some solid numbers there, I think that really did put a solid cherry on top of his season, where it just added validity to it. But also, I think just to be 18 years old and go do that, I think it just really shored up everything that we saw and just made his resume a little bit more encompassing there. So I thought his year was as impressive as any. And all of a sudden now you look at it, he played 65 games, and had the numbers that he had. So I think Kalaz was a standout here for sure. But Justin Crawford, the numbers that he's put up across the board was pretty crazy. From, you're going to see the stolen bases, the average, and if there can be a little bit more slug there, I mean, that's as strong of a season as anybody's had on this list. So really fun group and a lot of guys that I think just had quite impressive seasons, ranging from all different kinds of backgrounds and levels.
Right. It's like all walks of life, but like that's really what it was. All walks. We get all sorts of people that are deserving of this credit of being, close, if not on the all MILB team. So again, hitters done now. Pitchers on Friday. Article is going to be live on Friday as well. And the graphics team is cooking up some magic for this as well.
Ooh, looking forward to that. I know they're going to be cooking up some awesome stuff there. But I'm pumped to talk pitchers because that's a whole list of names that we've probably talked plenty about this year, but some names that we probably haven't discussed as much as we should. So that'll be fun to fill in there and have that discussion on the next episode.
And it's also like, who's better? Like, hey,
Yeah.
Bubba Chandler or Noah Schultz? And it's like, oh man, I don't know.
It gets really interesting with the pitching side of things. So that's going to be a fun conversation. And then Diamondbacks top prospects, it might be out on the site this week. So if you are checking out justbaseball.com pretty frequently, or if you're not, you should to see when that D-backs system will be out, but also would love for you to go check out the site. But you might see it there. The episode will definitely be next week. So we might get the list out before the episode, which rarely happens. Usually it's like hand in hand.
Both, yeah.
So just keep an eye out for that because I do think I'm going to get it done by Friday, especially if this hurricane, which isn't going to be a direct hit. So no worries for us, but I hope that anybody that listens that's in central or the northern parts of Florida stay safe out there with that storm coming in. But I know we're going to get enough of the weather where I'm going to be hunkered down here just hanging out and typing away. So I'll have some extra time to do that. And I think we will probably get it out by Friday. So keep an eye out. That D-back system was clowning it in the past. A lot better now all of a sudden. So a lot more interesting and fun names to discuss in that farm.
So can I ask you real quick, light a candle, put on some lo-fi while you work, or is it going to be like lights on and you're listening to, I know it's like lights on hip hop and you like the sound of like power tools in the background too when you work?
Yeah, it usually is the lights on and hip hop, but it might be with the clouds and everything and the rain, it might be a candle and lo-fi.
It feels candle and lo-fi to me.
Which I've never really done on the prospect write-ups. It really usually is lights on and hip hop, which is funny. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So that system totally different, and I'm pumped to be able to talk a little Slade Caldwell. Was able to see some of the backfields ABs that he has had and some other things. So it's going to be fun on that front. And Chrysanthus, I'm going to talk some Chrysanthus as well. I know a name that I just put you on to a couple of days ago, and you saw the numbers. I'm like, all right, well, that's going to be a fun dive also. So looking forward to that. Of course, pictures before that. As always, thank you for listening. If you can leave a rating, help us grow the show. Share it with your friends. The word of mouth is really slept on to help us grow this show. So we really appreciate it. And we look forward to talking prospects with you later this week.